Hello, my name is Lee and I'm working at Wessex Archaeology and the Lost and Found project. Funded by Historic England, Lost and Found sees us working with community groups across Wiltshire, the Midlands and Sheffield. And we're asking those groups to choose 2 objects from our archive to go into an interactive digital museum. This is a museum created by people, for people. So usually we deliver the sessions just like this, from the safety of our own homes, each of us digitally connected. But so you can get to choose some objects, we've managed to get into the Finds office here in our Salisbury space. In a minute, we're going to cut across to Erica and Phil, and they will show you 4 objects. From these 4 objects, you get to choose 2. So listen carefully, choose wisely, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thank you.
Welcome to Lost and Found, the project where you get to select objects for your museum. Now, the thing about museums is most times they've got beautiful objects in them, bling and beautifully unbroken objects. But this time we want to add an extra ingredient: people. And people all have names. People all have interesting stories to tell. And so the objects that we've got for your selection all have people attached to them with names. So what have we got? Let's start with the first named objects that we probably find in most museums. Coins with real people's names on them, and find out some of the stories that are attached to them. Now, Erica, you've been rummaging in the selection here.
I have, yes.
Have you got a nice coin with a nice name?
I certainly have, Phil.
Get the old glasses out. Now, you're going to tell me you know who this is.
I do, yes. Yes, this is a coin of Victorinus.
So,
he's an emperor in the late 3rd century AD.
And so, being an honourable man and an honourable Roman emperor, he probably lived a wonderful life, beating and expanding the empire, doing wonderful things for the people of the Roman Empire. Is that true?
Not really, Phil, no. Victorinus was only emperor for 2 years. His predecessor was only emperor for 3 days. The late 3rd century is quite a turbulent period, and Victorinus came to power after his predecessor was murdered, whose predecessor was also murdered.
So you're going to tell
times.
It's not a good badge, is it? It's not a good time to be an emperor.
It's not, no, especially if, like Victorinus, you have a habit of consorting and seducing the wives of your men and officers.
So the officer in general presumably didn't approve of this.
No, and one particularly didn't approve. His quartermaster actually killed him. Yes.
So, villain or hero, for you to decide. Now we move on to the next object. We've got an enormous gravestone. This one actually means quite a bit to me because I actually found it. And I found it underneath a wall here in Salisbury. And when we found it, we pieced it together and we've got this inscription: "Here lieth the body of Mary, the wife of Andrew Randall, who died," and then it drops off the edge. But you've actually got one of your colleagues who's actually been able to piece together some of the story attached to Mary Randall.
Yes, we have, yes. One of my colleagues looked into the parish burial and marriage records, and we've uncovered quite a family tragedy, unfortunately.
Tragedy?
Yes. We know that Mary and Andrew married in 1727, both young people of the parish, and they were married at St Edmund's Church. But then in 1753, tragedy strikes.
So they both died?
Yes, unfortunately. Andrew died first on the 18th of November, and then just a few weeks later, on the 13th of December, Mary also passed away.
But there's an even greater tragedy, I understand.
Yes, by the 30th of December, the burial records note that there were 2 infants of the surname Randall who were also buried at the same church.
So the question is, why do 4 people, all with the same family, die more or less at the same time? Now, we happen to know that the year previous to their death, there was a massive outbreak of smallpox in the city.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, smallpox was quite common at that time, and outbreaks flared up in Salisbury and other big cities quite frequently.
So, pandemics, endemics are nothing new. The story of this gravestone is a tragic one, and we've actually got the name of the person who was involved in it. Is she worthy of your museum? So let's move on to item number 3.
Right. Now, I think you'll recognise this one, Phil.
Oh yeah, this is a good old favourite of mine. It's another of my sites, another site in Salisbury. It's a clay pipe. We excavated the site there, and we found a wonderful inscription along the side. J. Schemes, it says. He is the maker. Just to confirm, on the other side, it says Salisbury. Now, as my memory serves me correctly, he lived next door to another clay pipe maker, Morgan.
Yes, that's right, yes.
And as far as I can understand, Morgan Sr. died,
Yes.
and then his wife literally hopped over the fence and married Schemes.
Yes, leaving Morgan's son in charge of his clay pipe business.
Which, of course, led to some friction between the 2 households.
It certainly did, yes. And it ends up with Morgan's son attacking his own stepmother,
That's quite...
being called up in court for it.
But she was almost in that respect a tragic individual, because not only did she get beaten up by her stepson, she got beaten up by her husband after that.
Yes. In 1863, James Skeens is called before the magistrates' court, and he's charged with beating his wife and is bound over to keep the peace.
See, this is the wonderful thing about archaeology. You find objects like this, but then you find that there are these hidden stories which are actually in the written records that you actually tease out. And just to think, this clay pipe was actually made by a rogue.
Yes, yeah, you could think he's a hard-working artisan, but then when you look deeper into his story, it's not true at all.
And then, of course, he was had up in court again for a totally different offence, environmental pollution.
Yes. The smoke from his chimney, where he made his pipes, was causing a nuisance in the neighbourhood, and he actually appeared in court on several occasions, because each time he was told that he must repair the chimney and use different fuels, and he just didn't, basically. He just carried on polluting the area with smoke. But
of course, I won't say justice was done perhaps in the end, because by the time towards the end of his life, his business had dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. He was no more the status of a pauper, and he spent his last days in the workhouse.
He did, yes, at Britford, just outside of Salisbury. He wasn't there very long at all. He passed away early in 1890, and he's buried on the London Road Cemetery.
So, an absolute rogue.
Yes, not a very nice man at all.
And now we move on to the final object. What have we got in there? Ah, yes, I remember this one. Now, we've got a block of chalk there with a list of what, a dozen names?
Yes, yeah.
And across the top there, what's it say?
It says A Company Bombers and 26 of the 6th, 1916.
So, these are people who were practicing at Larkhill
to
go
Australian
to the west.
troops. They've come over to help with the war effort, and they're training at Larkhill to be bombers.
And the one that really is interesting for us is this one, L.C. Weathers. Lawrence Carthage Weathers. Carthage, I think, is a wonderful name. But he really was an interesting story.
He was, yes. He was born in New Zealand to Australian parents, and he grew up in South Australia. He moved to Adelaide when he left school, and he worked as an undertaker. And then in 1915, his brother was killed at Gallipoli, which obviously inspired him to join up. And by the end of June 1916, he's here at Larkhill.
And of course, the training that he got at Larkhill in bombing actually served him well when he got into the trenches.
It certainly did, yes. Towards the end of the war, at the Battle of Mont St Quentin, He single-handedly stormed an enemy position, armed only with his hand grenades.
And took the position.
Yes, yeah, he captured 3 machine guns and many prisoners as well.
But of course, unfortunately, he also ended up with a tragic end.
He did, yes. A few weeks later, at the Battle of Quinton-Saint-Canal, he was sheltering, and unfortunately a shell burst just above where he was sheltering, and he died from the wounds he received there.
So he never knew that he'd won the VC?
No, he was awarded it, but he never knew that he'd gained it.
So there we have it. Our 4 contenders. We have heroes and villains, tragic stories, and perhaps in some respects, some happy stories. So, we've got 2 candidates for the museum. It's up to you to decide which 2 go into the exhibit.